All right, we're gonna get started. Thanks so much for coming, especially because I hear there's something else going on that's really cool. But we're here because we love fantasy and we love urban fantasy. And that's what we're gonna be talking about today is urban fantasy. And I'm Sarah Noffke, and I'm gonna do an introduction in a minute and explain why I should be bobbing around on this stage and telling you anything at all. But one of the things that I found really interesting when preparing for this speech was that defining the genre of urban fantasy, that is very specific and niche-oriented, was really difficult. And not hitting it right creates a lot of problems inside of revenue streams and sellability and marketing and genre. So anyways, my job today is going to be to help you to define what exactly this niche genre is that I believe still has a huge ceiling for us to hit. But here's my disclaimer. Nothing that I'm saying is absolutely law. Because I know that, because you can break laws inside of fantasy, you can break laws inside of all sorts of genres, and I gave this speech at 20Books Holland. And Steve Higgs is sitting in the audience. He's not here today, I don't think. But anyways, he's sitting in the audience, and if you know Steve, you know that he's an urban fantasy writer, and he was like, I don't do any of that. And he does really, really well for himself. He has a vampire series that was #1 in vampires, and there were no vampires. I was like, well, Steve, maybe you can do things that the rest of us mortals cannot. So anyways, I just want to put that caveat out there because I think, so often I get like, well, you said this, and it's like, well, that's what works for me. But we all know with writing and being an author that it's not absolutely concrete. So my name is Sarah Noffke, and I'll give you a little background about me, also with a lot of shameless plugging, because why not? No, it's just to give you an idea of what I have done. So I have about 108 books. Of those, about 100 of them have hit the bestseller list. I gross over 6 figures every single year. I've done that since 2019, primarily with urban fantasy. And I write primarily with LMBPN. Michael Anderle and I have created the Buffon universe, which you will see on the other side. And that has grossed well over 7 figures for LMBPN each year. So I'm not bragging. My point is, I actually really fucked this up really bad, and I got really poor and didn't hit the genre right before I actually hit it right. So that's important. And I think that the reason that that is really important for me was I was trying to sell urban fantasy, but it's like if I'm trying to sell you French fries and I give you mashed potatoes. You might really like I love mashed potatoes, but you asked for French fries. So my point is that defining the genre of urban fantasy and hitting it right, I think is really, really important. And it's where I can tell you that my success changed. When I was writing urban fantasy and selling actual urban fantasy, that's when I started to see revenue. Because before that, I was writing things that were too fantasy-based, and my readers really wanted something that hit this niche. Anyways, I, like I said, have the Buffon universe, and it is heavily urban fantasy. Before that, I was doing Orosaren, and I was spending way too much time not in urban, but I was selling it as that. I've also gotten the Dream Travelers. I've been doing this for a few years. And I've studied the genre. I've also written things that I shouldn't, like science fiction and game lit, but those can all go into urban fantasy, which I think is one of the reasons that we're awesome, because we can do it all in urban fantasy. So often science fiction is constricted to very, limited genre. So that's who I am, and that's why I am up here. So we're about to set the stage for urban fantasy, and here was the thing that I started off with, is talking to people about this. Many people actually didn't know what specifically it meant to be urban fantasy. It gets there's like just a needle that you have to like tick that if it's not there, it's not actually urban fantasy. So whenever I was asking different people, and I was asking lots of authors, and they were saying, I don't think actually people know. And they don't know the percentage. And I was having a conversation earlier with somebody, and they said, well, what if there's time travel involved? And can that be urban fantasy? Well, the thing is it actually comes down to, for me, again, no rules, a percentage. You can't spend 80% of the novel in the 1800s and call it urban fantasy. You have to spend 80% of it in modern day, and that's what we're going to talk about, is the modern day aspects that really define this genre and why it makes it so critical for our readers who are looking for a modern day fantasy escape. All right, so let's set the stage for an urban fantasy. Here's an example from one of mine. You walk into a pawn shop in London, and there's all sorts of weird artifacts, and there's, cool watches, and there's knives, and no guns, because I hate guns. And there's all sorts of really neat things, and there's a grumpy guy that's sitting there with greasy hair, and then there's a guy that's a hippie, and he's Father Time, and that's his assistant. And he's a hippie that wears a tie-dye shirt, and it usually has a hippie phrase on it that says something like, time flies when you're having fun. And he controls all of time, and he has since the very beginning. The point is that what we've taken is a character that is so critical. Everybody knows what Father Time is, right? I don't have to educate you. But now I've taken him, and I have turned him on his head, and I've made him into somebody different and weird, and he's a hippie, and he's running a pawn shop, and he's got a grumpy old elf that you didn't even know was an elf that just sits there and criticizes people. It takes the fantasy aspect, and it makes it very modern and mundane. And sitting next to him is this southern debutante who's got this giant blue hair, and she's just filing her nails and talking about the rivers in Russia because she's Mother Nature. So what we really want to do is we want to take all of these different kinds of characters that the Sandman, Mother Nature, Father Time, the devil, God, whoever, and make them as normal and interesting as possible. Because our readers, I have found, again, no rules, they like that. They do not want Father Time to be this guy that's sitting on a cloud and, throwing down laws and doing all these weird things. So that's how I've set the stage for it, and it's really helped me to create this world building, which we're going to talk about, and that's my Father Time. Isn't he cool? He's a hippie. All right, I'm doing just more of the shameless marketing. Keys to great urban fantasy. So this is my character, Liv, and she started the urban fantasy that really changed my life and changed my career. And I'll talk about her because she was so critical, and defining her was so critical in my success. And we're going to talk about characters because when we come up with a character that is great, but not great enough, and has level up potential, and has all the right core values, but hasn't really figured them out yet, that's when you have the character that people will read. She's in 70 books, and they always hit the bestseller list because they love Liv Buffont. All right, so keys to great urban fantasy. And just so you guys know, I will be taking questions, and I'm heavily relying on y'all for those. Okay, so I'm going to list these out, and then we're going to dive deeper into them. So in urban fantasy, we really need to think about the setting and the world building. And I cannot stress enough how important that world building is. If you do not create a world that is interesting, that is Hogwarts, that is fun, that has dynamics, that has rules that can be broken, you don't have a fantasy novel. That is the contemporary idea. You want to always have magic, obviously, and I think you always have to have technology. And I will dive into Magitech because I think it's so freaking awesome, because I'm really bad at science, and when you have Magitech, you can do whatever you want. Characters and creatures, and that's going to be really, really critical. And here's one of the things that I found, and I hope I'm not jumping ahead because I forgot. you have to have creatures in urban fantasy. It is so critical to this. I swear to God, I've written all these great female characters that are badass and have knives and stuff. Do you know who the readers freaking love? They love the squirrel. They're just like, oh my God, is Faraday gonna come back? I'm like, damn it. Okay, tone and pacing and action. And the reason that I touch on that one is I think it behaves differently in urban fantasy. So we'll talk about that. And themes. And themes, I think, when we're talking about something that needs to be urban and modern, have to be different than something that would be contemporary or epic. The themes are different. All right, but first, let's go back to setting and world building. So we're going to really dive into some examples later, because for me, whenever I was confusing what was urban fantasy versus fantasy, I wasn't really sure on it. So what helped me was to do some side-by-side comparisons. So in the world building for urban fantasy, it's going to bring the magic to you, unlike in the classic versions where you go to the magic. So for instance, I have a electronic repair store, and things just behave differently sometimes. Versus Harry, as in Harry Potter, I'm sorry, I should have said that, goes to Hogwarts, and that's where the magic is. So really remember, if you're gonna do urban fantasy and that's, you know, your jam, that you really need to disguise the setting. Again, I keep having to say this, no rules, because Steve Higgs is gonna walk in here and be like, but I did this. He's the best. Okay, I love this part of world building. And I think that it's very critical in my series, and that's what I can speak to. You need to have secret societies and governing agencies. And the reason for that is one of the things we're going to talk about with themes is justice. I think that it is really important when we're doing urban fantasy. That's what people want to see, because it's urban, and justice is so much a part of those core ideas. But I mean, why do we like dystopian? Because we like organizations, and we like organizations that are broken, and we want to be the person that rises above and the rebel that fixes them. Well, you can't do that if you don't actually still, you know, create that magical, secret governing society. We love to rise up against the man. And so what I found to be really critical with my books is you create this governing agency that's half good and half bad, and the protagonist is always fighting to fix it while being a part of it. And then it needs to have all these rules and things, because if you don't have rules, then everything becomes way too easy, right? So it's really, really fun whenever we have some sort of big bad, you know, man that's trying to keep us down, and then this small protagonist that's trying to figure out how to navigate through the secret organization and agency. All right, I keep saying this. My daughter would say I'm a broken record, but rules and magical laws, but they can be broken. And so I have, obviously, a lot of rules and things, and we have spreadsheets, and there's these spells, but everything needs to be able to be broken somehow, or otherwise I feel like you're gonna write yourself into a corner. So have your rules, have your magical laws, and I have things like, oh, they can portal anywhere they want, except for in these zones. No portal zone, because otherwise they can always get out of it. I love this about my characters. Their magic is calorie-based. And so, oh, I'm feeling a little depleted, but I need to do a spell, go eat a donut. And the better the calories, like the more calories, the more sugar, the more fat, the better the magic, you know? And so, but the thing is all of a sudden if they're in battle and they've been doing one spell after another spell after another spell, well, they're depleted. So, you know, Pop-Tart. I don't know. I haven't thought about that one in a while. But my point is I always have these limitations, because if you don't have them, it's going to make it way too easy for them to A, succeed, or B, get defeated. So figure them out, figure out what the rules are, and try to keep track of them. Because I can't even tell you, after 108 books, how many times I have screwed up. And I get readers messaging me, and they go, technically, they couldn't have done that based on your rules. All right, make them mundane and fantastical. And I think that's one of the critical things when we're talking about setting and world building. Like I said, I've got, the repair shop, and that is where my main magician hangs out, and she repairs things with magic. It's a repair shop. It's not this cool, glamorous place. The headquarters for the secret agency, where they govern all of magic, is a palm reading store in Santa Monica. Readers, I have found, really, really like when you set things in places that they don't expect, because it plays with the child mind in us, where, I don't know if y'all do this, but I'll just be walking around and I'll like see like a little cubby and I'm like, I wonder if an elf lives in there. You know, and it's just fun. So try to think about making it mundane, secretly fantastical. All right, magic and technology. I love Magitech. This is my dragon, Lunas, and he supersizes to a 747 whenever the moon comes out, which makes parking horrible. Okay, magic exists in the real world, but it's concealed from the public. And again, this is a rule that can be broken. But what I found is that with urban fantasy, it's really great if the muggles don't know about magic. Now, again, I am 70 some odd books, I can't even remember, into this series. And at some point, I had to have this arc where everybody could see magic. Oh, that was the big thing. And so now everybody can see magic, but then we just have the conservative types that go, that's not there. So I like to have the idea of it concealed because it makes it more interesting. And like I said about magic having a cost with the calories, I think that that's really, really important because you can't just keep doing magical spell after magical spell. I even have to have I have a healer and somehow, some way when somebody's on their deathbed, well, it was their day off, or they're in Fiji and they can't get to a portal zone. You need to have some way that your character can't always succeed. Magitech, so no science needed, because I used to write science fiction and I wrote it really, really poorly. I can't even tell you, again, the emails that I would get, and they'd be like, spaceships don't do that. How could he feel that? He was in a spacesuit. These kind of things, and I was like, so I quit writing science fiction and I started writing urban fantasy, and all of a sudden I made money. But the thing I love about Magitech is I don't have to explain anything. And that's why you're in the right room, because you just go, it was magic. I don't have to explain it to you. It was magic, Magitech. And I love the word Magitech. And then wish fulfillment necessary. I think that it's really, really critical when you're writing urban fantasy. Think about everything that you want. Okay, maybe think of the top three. Give it to your readers. So I want to be able to eat anything I want and never gain a pound. So I make it so that my magicians can eat anything they want, and they just do a spell, and all of a sudden everybody's trim and lean and beautiful, except for the gnomes. They're disgusting. But think about it. I make mine poor, and then over time they get rich because they learn renovation magic, and so they can take their little shack and then they can turn it into a mansion. All they have to do is level up and learn the spells. So figure out what it is you want and make your characters give it to the reader. They love that kind of thing. All right, tone and pacing. And like I said, I think it behaves differently in this genre because our readers are not reading military sci-fi. Sorry. They're not reading military sci-fi. They're not reading horror. They're reading something where they need to have fun. And that is really, really critical. But they don't need to have so much fun all the time. They need to have a break from the fun, a little bit of action, bite their nails, sit on the edge of their seat, and then laugh and then cry, and then do it again. Oh my God, this is my dragon, Lunas, and this was a really, side note, sorry. But this is the kind of thing that when you're an urban fantasy writer, this becomes your normal day. And I love my job because I have friends that have really boring jobs. And they're like, oh, I had to do the expense reports and the things and, the stuff. And mine was that I argued with Michael because Michael Anderle, he wanted this as a cover. And it's the dragon, and he's eating a villager, and he's going, spit water out, because he's eating the villager. And I was like, hard no, Michael, no. I am a professional. If you have to stomp around and go, I'm an adult, you're probably not one. And so he literally stomped around because he was trying to be an adult, and he got his graphic, and we put it on T-shirts. And it's the thing that everybody loves. I should have let him have it on the freaking cover because everybody's like, spit water out. But again, you're in the right place because you could be writing horror stuff, and then you're going to have all these gory images in your head. Instead, you get to write urban fantasy. And again, keep it light. So it needs to be, I don't have a lot of murder, I don't have a lot of dark things, I don't have a lot of romance. That's what works for my readers. I've noticed that my readers are more conservative. That's why they flock to the urban fantasy genre. Most of my readers that I have polled are between the ages of 35 to 65, and they tend to skew conservative. So they don't want a lot of violence. A lot of them have had really hard times. So this is their escape. Okay, so keep it light, keep it going. Michael will call me out if I've gone 6 chapters without somebody getting chased or nearly stabbed or some sort of crime happening. So we need to keep the action going, but don't keep it going too much. So it gets a little confusing because then we get in trouble if all of a sudden our readers are too stressed. Urban fantasy readers, from my experience, do not want to be too stressed. They want you to ebb and flow off of that tension. I never have a lull unless they need a rest. So I literally will have fight scenes. My fight scenes at the end of the books are about 10 to 15,000 words long. And they move to different places. There's always a riddle, a challenge, a labyrinth, a monster, and then the big bad villain at the end. But in between, the dragon is making fart jokes because we need to ebb and flow. And I actually don't tell fart jokes because I think that I'm not 8. I think that you need to ebb and flow off of that tension, that it's really, really important. So they will literally be racing through, and then the dragon will be like telling a dad joke, and I don't have one off the top of my head. Sorry, I'm gonna really kick myself for that one later. And then you have to make it necessary. And so the protagonist has said in many times, hey, dragon, it was you telling me that joke that calmed the tension, made me refocus, think, have the courage. Now I'm gonna go and be a badass. So don't just tell jokes because that really will piss off the reader. If they're like, why are you squandering your good time when you could be, fighting a villain? Make it necessary. That's my cat. So characters and creatures, literally, see, when you get to be an author, it's so freaking awesome. So my cat is the main familiar in the Liv Buffont series, and it was because I was talking to Michael, and he was like, why don't you give your character a cat that won't let her do anything and knows everything? And I was like, that's a good idea. And so anyways, this is Plato, and Plato knows everything and has been around forever. He doesn't have 9 lives, he has like 1,000,000 lives. But then I got to go and give the cover designer a picture of my cat and say, hey, put him on a cover, and it was great. And again, I'm not kidding you. Everybody loves a freaking cat. They don't give a shit. I killed the cat one time. I have so many emails about that. They were like, oh my God, I could not believe when Plato, I cried more than when my grandmother died. I was like, I was always gonna bring the cat back. He has a bazillion lives. They just didn't know that yet because I had rules, but they could be broken. All right, so the thing about characters and creatures is everyone must have a level up potential. And I think that that's really, really important in all books. But in urban fantasy, I found that what I do is I start them off without any abilities, without any talent, without any knowledge, usually. And then they're poor. They really need to be poor. And they probably have some sort of trauma, like that they're working past, like, well, obviously their parents are dead. I mean, that's just how we have to start off all novels, right? Their parents are dead, they're dealing with the murders, because it gives them so much level up potential. But it's the reason that a series cannot go forever. So I have 70 some odd books in the Buffon universe, but I literally have multiple protagonists. They're the same person. Don't tell my readers that, but they're literally the same person. I just like, one of them had a baby, and now we start with that one because it's a baby and it's gone through this trauma. And then we level them up until they're rich and famous and, you know, awesome and have every ability in the entire world. And then they have a baby, and then it does the same thing. This is literally not rocket science. It's really easy once we figure it out, I have found. I've also found that my readers hate if the character whines. Put them on the subway, make it wreck, make them get robbed, make them, you know, it doesn't matter. Give them every single problem, they can't whine about it. They need to tell a joke, they need to just be relaxed, because we don't like whiners, and we don't like them in our protagonists. Sidekicks are key, and I already mentioned that. I have the cat, Plato. I have the scientist, squirrel, Faraday. They can all talk, and most people can't hear them talk, which makes it really great. I have Lunas the dragon, and I have Elvis the Chinese dragon. And so they always have those, and no matter what, those are always the most loved characters, no matter what. And you need to have a ragtag crew. I've got the King of the Fae, and he doesn't have a brain cell in his head, and I have, you know, I have friends and bakers that have secret ingredients, and all of these different crew, because what we really like, and think about your favorite TV shows, and I've done this as a study, you know, The Big Bang Theory, Friends, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, these comedies really do define urban fantasy for us. And if we think about it, it's always a crew of people that, you know what, they may fight, they may not get along, but they always rally together in the end, and you can always depend on them. Always have your ragtag crew, but again, like where we started, everyone must have level up potential. So start your protagonists out with no friends. Their parents are dead, they have no friends, they're poor, go from there. And then all of a sudden, they make one friend, and then they make another, and then it becomes this beautiful conglomeration. Readers freaking love it, because we all want friends. All right, themes. And I won't spend a ton of time on this, because I think that I've covered it a lot, and we're getting to question time, which I hope you have some. So themes in urban fantasy tend to go along the lines of modern day themes. You know, so we aren't fighting the Great War. We aren't changing the world. We aren't doing things that are huge. We're saving the day. And we're doing it over and over and over again. Mine tend to always be about justice. My readers, like I said, are conservative. A lot of them are retired military, and they love the idea of justice. And fighting for the little guy. So think about your themes, but whenever I was talking to my friend Jess about this before the speech, we really were able to hone down on the idea that if you cannot communicate your theme, you cannot sell your book. Be able to do it in one sentence. Mine are, you know, they would rather die than see an injustice happen. They will do whatever they can in order to fight. And those are really important, and I think that they're different in urban fantasy, which is why we spent a little time on it. Okay, so we're gonna finish up with a little comparison, because like I said, I really fucked up in this business for a long time, because I was writing urban fantasy, but it was fantasy, and I was selling it as urban fantasy, and the covers looked like urban fantasy. So I was selling urban fantasy to Lord of the Rings readers. And it helped me to really start to do a side-by-side comparison. So I took two of the most well-known ones, and we're gonna look at them side by side and what makes them different. So in the Dresden Files, I know you're amazed by my slide. The setting is modern-day Chicago, where magic coexists with technology and urban life. We can contrast that very starkly with the Lord of the Rings, where Middle-earth is removed from modern urban life. And you want to check yourself on these. Like I said, I had the Orosaren series. They spent 95% of the book on another Middle-earth type planet. Do you think the series sold? It did not. Protagonist, you've got Harry, who's the wizard and the private detective. So we've given him that, you can call it mundane, but you've given him a regular job. You know, like I said with my repair lady, where you have Frodo that embarks on a quest to destroy one ring. You know, he's saving the world. All Harry's doing is solving a case and then solving a case and saving the day over and over and over again. Creatures, we've got vampires and werewolves in the Dresden Files that are hidden in the human world. I think that that's key, at least to begin with, but then in The Lord of the Rings, of course, everybody knows what fantastical creatures inhabit the fantasy world. It's slightly different, but it's starkly different at the same time, if you're grabbing what I'm saying. Okay. And themes. Themes, like I said, we've got contemporary social issues. You can really dive into some really cool social issues, and I tend to have a lot of opinions. I know it's shocking, but I love to lace my books with all of these contemporary, social issues and make commentary because, well, it's my fucking book, so I get to do what I want. And then in The Lord of the Rings, we've got friendship, courage, and then good versus evil. And I'll keep that slide up, and then if you guys want to ask some questions, I definitely think we have about 10 minutes, and it would be a good opportunity, and then if not, we can play a game. Any questions? Yeah, come on up. I think that the microphone is live, yeah.
So, as a question for you, what do you think about Netflix's TV show or movie Bright? Because it had a lot of the classic fantasy elements, but also put them into. I know that there.
No,
were
it's
issues
just funny
with it,
because we had this conversation last night, and
Okay.
everybody found out that, or somebody found out that I know nothing about
Okay.
any modern
well,
things.
in that case, it's basically modern, so orcs, elves, and stuff living in the modern world, full on existence in the modern world. Everybody knows about it. There's no secret magic there. There are secret organizations within that, but the magic itself is not secret. That's the series. It's similar to the series that I'm writing, where magic itself is like commonplace. Your barista might be a centaur. People use heating runes to heat their houses, but there are secret, shadowy organizations that exist. So does the magic need to be hidden, or can it keep all of those themes but not hide the fact that there's centaurs, elves, fairies, whatever?
It sounds fascinating, and it sounds like it is very heavily urban fantasy. Mm-hmm. I don't know anything about it. You like the show?
It was a movie on Netflix, and the show has problems. The movie has problems, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, focus on the problems because I think that that's an area to avoid. And then to answer your question, see, that's one of those really weird caveats in this genre that we've talked about, whether it needs to stay concealed or hidden. Mm-hmm. Because I just think that you have a lot of opportunity when it's like, no, we can't let the others know,
Yeah.
And that becomes this really fun thing. It just depends on your purpose and the world building that you create. Right. I wrote myself into a place where at some point magic just had to become known. Mm-hmm. Do you think that yours would be better if you kept it hidden?
I don't think so. The way I describe it is Lucifer Supernatural and Bright had a baby, and that's my series.
Okay.
So, in Dresden Files and so on. But it definitely hits all of the urban fantasy beats, but I did want to ask specifically, since you hammered so hard on magic has to be hidden, that I wanted to ask a question about it.
No, I know, and I realize that it's one of those things that it can be argued either way, so I don't think I answered your question, but do what you think works, and it can work no matter what.
Totally fair, I just wanted to have the dialogue.
Good, all right, thanks.
If you don't mind, I actually have two questions. One should be short. Have you found a sweet spot for length for your books?
That is a fantastic question. 70,000.
About 70,000.
Yeah.
Okay. The other question was, do you think there's a sweet spot for location? I mean, LA or New York or something like that, or London. Those are classic places, but Dresden Files is Chicago. Pat Briggs's ones are in rural Washington State, but do you think something like Halifax or Vancouver, BC would be good?
It's a really great question, and I think that I actually glazed over it, so I'm glad that you asked it. Because one of the aspects of urban fantasy that I think is critical is that it does need to be mainly set in a large city place, an urban place. Mine is Los Angeles, but there's also London. But they skip over to Scotland and they hang out. And the great libraries in Timbuktu. I think that city aspect is really, really important. And what we want to give our readers is that wish fulfillment. And my readers, especially because I have a lot of disabled ones, they love the opportunity to travel. So set it in a major metropolitan area. Gives yourself a lot of opportunities. You got subways, taxis, you've got history, and then have them pop off to rural places. You can get away with it, just keep it to about, I would say, 15-20%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Could you maybe expand a little bit on any insights you have about after magic is revealed, or if, say, a series starts with magic revealed and how that impacts the world, the characters, the systems of government, things like that, and how you might pull it back so that it doesn't spiral out of control?
Yeah, and it sounds like you're talking from a specific experience, maybe with your own, but maybe not. What comes to mind for me is that the reason to have magic concealed is there's got to be repercussions. Well, the mortals can't know about magic because if they did, they would abuse it, you know? And so we've got the governing agency. And so maybe it gets out there, and I had it where mortals all of a sudden found out about magic and then they all of a sudden burned out their souls in order to get it.
Right.
So now we need to put it back, you know? So really think about the reason that you're concealing it. And for me, usually it's power and control.
Right.
And so we need to go back to why we're controlling things.
Right.
Does that help?
A little bit. I was mostly asking because I've read books where magic has been revealed, and then I know the authors have struggled to sort of put it back in the box. And I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about like ways that you can not reset it, but give those authors an opportunity to then either choose to like run with it, lean into it, and evolve with the magic kind of thing, and the world evolves around them, versus, you know, how to silence things, maybe keep it to a city or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. And that's the thing, is that you're literally the magician of your world. So you could just make it a law that all of a sudden we just blanketed there. But you're right, once it's revealed, it becomes a problem. I've struggled with it with my own. But I would just try to maybe think about the long-term planning of your series, and then that might help you to avoid getting into it too quickly.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question.
Hello. Can you have an urban fantasy with a lot of horrific elements? Because you're speaking of they want a place of comfort, the readers.
Yeah.
What if you have tension, you know, like Anne Rice meets Highlander, right? Where it's not a grim setting, but there's a lot of grim things happening. Is it possible?
You can do dark urban fantasy. I write young adult, so again, I'm speaking from that point of view. I made that choice because it suited my writing style, it suited my preferences, and I found it to be a better genre for me to, you know, do well in. But you can do dark urban fantasy, and you can do adult, and in those they can get away with more violence, darkness. But then you want to be careful, because if you're doing Highlander, you may be going more epic, and you may be confusing the genre a bit. So, you know, take a look at what you're doing, and if it suits.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
So my question is, so I have two questions. The first one is, so you spoke about justice and like being an important theme. Can it be an urban fantasy about a character who's a witch, and the theme is basically personal growth, like she's growing as a person, and there may be acts of justice along the way, but I mean, there could be lessons that she learns, so it's not justice globally or...
Yeah, and I think that you're touching on a really great point that we need to remember holistically with writing, and it needs to be that there needs to be an internal struggle that the character is dealing with, and then there needs to be a bigger external thing. So mine is always, yes, they're dealing with overcoming limitations inside of themselves, confident issues, but there does need to be a bigger thing, and I think in Save the Cat they talk of, you know, that's a pretty big thing. So yes, you can do it, but I don't think you're going to deliver enough of a story if it's just about their personal growth.
Okay.
My opinion.
Okay. And the second question, you said that the readers are ages 35 to 65, but you said a lot of them are former, like retired or men. So I'm assuming, is it mostly men? And then for young adult, do you also have, you know, younger readers, or like who's the audience, if you can share?
I mean, it depends. I'd really like to get into the younger audience, but because of our target demographic, it tends to just skew a little older, and that's the ones that have time to read. And I would say that it's about 60% women, 40% men.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
When you're talking about the hidden magic debate a little bit, do you think that it matters what your protagonist knows going into it? So Dresden is a wizard in the first book. He knows he's a wizard. Harry Potter is not. He becomes a wizard, but he knows nothing at the beginning. Does that have an effect on whether or not it's urban fantasy?
I don't think that it would have an effect. Do you?
I don't, no.
I mean, it's a great question. I think that it's better if they do know, from my standpoint, but that they are limited, and then that gives that growth. But I mean, it's totally debatable. And I mean, it sounds like this whole hidden magic thing is one of the gray parts. But
Awesome, thank you.
thank you.
We have a question from online.
Oh, great.
Discovering magic and supernatural things can be great in the first book, but how do we keep the sugar hit for readers in the following novels?
Okay, I'm sorry. I blacked out, I think.
So in the first book, discovering magic, like that part, how do you keep the interest for readers in the following books?
So how do we build arcs through long series?
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I mean, I could give it another presentation on that, because creating a long series really becomes, like a huge science project, because you need to have these arcs, and they need to constantly get bigger and bigger. So I always break mine up into, the first one is personal development, and then once they've done that, then it's, taking over the government, and then it's, taking over the world. So we can, as long as we break it up and make sure that our arcs are organized, we're good. And we have time for one more question, is that right? Okay, one more question.
So I have read most of your books. I
Oh
love
my God,
them,
thank you.
And I love all your characters. Unfortunately, the animals for me are the important ones.
I know,
right?
you're the one.
I especially love the dragon, or the I can't remember what he's called. Elvis. What is he? He's a flying, the Elvis, wasn't he like?
Oh, he's a chimera. Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, he's
He's
funny.
just disguised as a dragon.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'm writing young adult, and what would you say is the line for that? As far as like, my character has a huge crush on her neighbor boyfriend, who she's known her whole life, and all of a sudden she develops feelings for him. And I mean, they kiss and do that kind of thing, but that's kind of all. Is that still in the young adult, or is that too much? I mean, like, where's the line for that?
It's a great question. The way that I handle it is, for young adult, yeah, it doesn't ever graduate over like a PG-13
Just
sort of situation.
All PG.
And there's never any sex in my books.
Yeah.
Not even fade to black. I just think that that's the better way to do it. But I would always go with your instinct, And I mean, the tension is nice. And whenever I had more tension, I had more young adult readers. It's just that my readers are old. Yeah. They're all watching this and they're like, what did she just say?
Well, I'm not that old, and I'm a reader. So.
No, you're not. No, but they just don't like it. They just don't want it, And they definitely don't want too much tension, and they definitely do not want love triangles. No hard no there. So I would skew more towards the conservative aspect. Kiss, hold hands, like no groping.
Okay, all right, that's where I am. I just want to make sure like that was okay with the young adult as well.
I think so, but it's probably debatable. I just ended this with no groping, so I think that's the place to bow out.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. It was really good to be here.